and there. Hello lovelies, how are we? Welcome to the November 2022 episode of the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast. My name's Leslie and this is a podcast about yarny things, crochet, knitting, spinning, machine knitting, whatever I turn my hand to, recorded on the south coast of the UK. I tend to record throughout the month as I complete things or as I have things to show, and then I post on the last weekend of each month. Hope everyone's well. Welcome, new viewers, returning viewers, you're all very welcome here. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the comments and thoughts on previous podcasts and also on the weekly vlog. It used to be the Not Quite Enough Distance vlog, but now it's the Not Quite Enough Fill Your Own Adventure type thing. It started during COVID and I've carried it on. So that's weekly, that goes up every Friday. It shows a bit of crafting, but tends to be more about life. So, whatever that means. I am wearing a finished object, but I shall come to that later. Firstly, the make-along. We have a make-along running this year. It's been running since I think the beginning of May, and it's the Clearly Not Quite Enough Yarn make-along. There isn't a hashtag because it's only on Ravelry unless you want to email me, and if you do, please email me at notquiteenoughyarn@gmail.com. but it's a make-along to have garments, adult size garments with sleeves. I think I said with sleeves, can't remember, where you're using more than one yarn, and that can be more than one yarn from the same maker, or it can be the same base but from different dyers, but the criterion is, please can we clearly see where the yarn changes. So if you're holding two yarns together all the way through the project and it's a consistent look, that's not eligible, I'm afraid. But if we can clearly see where one yarn changes to another, you're in. As I said earlier, the entry is on Ravelry. There is a thread on the Not Quite Enough Yarn podcast group on Ravelry, so please post your pictures. This could be yarns you're thinking of using, you know, you can put it up there saying, do you think this group or this group would look better? It could be your finished object, it could be your progress, and it can be comments on other people's projects or photographs. So it could be answering the question of which yarns, or just commenting, great pattern, where did you find that, lovely colours, you know, whatever you want to say. I have been drawing quarterly. Obviously we're getting towards year end, so there's just one more quarterly draw and then the grand draw to come, and I'll do those in January to give everyone a chance to get everything they want posted by the end of December. And I'd use random number generator. The first post it brings up without a photograph has a pattern prize, and the first post it comes up with a photograph has a physical prize. So yarn, usually. Yeah, I wouldn't try and pretend to be more imaginative than that. The inspiration from this, for this make-along, was the way that I craft. So you can see I have cupboards of yarn behind me. There's another one over there. There's some cones over here. There's a lot of yarn. There will be more this month later, which I'll show you in another clip. But I rarely have enough for an entire garment to be made of the same yarn or same colour. This FO is the exception to that rule, but generally I tend to add in stripes, colour blocks, fades. Yeah, I rarely have enough. I tend to buy yarn on a pretty basis rather than let's buy a sweater quantity. So that's The make-along, I'm feeling very jumbled, but I'm guessing you probably know what's going on anyway, so this is just a brief reminder. So make-along, garment, sleeves, please. Clearly marked to show where yarns change in it. Can be all the same dye, can be the same base from different dyers, as long as it's different types of yarn. Yeah, I think I've jumbled that into a tangled ball of yarn. Yes. It's going to be one of those, isn't it? It's very cold here. The weather has suddenly changed and it's very wet and miserable. I'm looking out of the window. So it's all a bit... But I will try and cheer you with bright, shiny things and yarn, of which there are many pretties, aren't there? I mean, look at this. It's just fabulous. I'm a very lucky person. So yeah, that's the make along. I will also this year be doing the December along. I'll do a reminder of that later in the podcast, but essentially it'll be a thread on Ravelry. And again, if you're unable to use Ravelry, please email me on notquiteenoughyarn@gmail.com and I will add your thread, your post to the thread. And it's just trying to take an opportunity to take a little bit of time for ourselves each day for our crafting. It may be that you have an advent to open and work on. It may be not yarn craft, it might be that you're doing something else, some cross stitch, which I know is yarn in a kind of way. But it's just the hope that you take a few minutes out each day for yourself to do your craft, to take some time out from all the busyness that is December, and there'll be a prize for that as well. Again, I will talk about it later in the podcast because hopefully by then I will be coherent. It's because I'm cold. I'm just going to moan about the weather. And yes, I shouldn't be moaning about the weather because I have a new finished item to keep me warm, except it's not all that warm. But this is, I'm writing it down. This is by Pearl Soho, and this is the classic knit jacket, I think. It's a free pattern. I'll put the link, oh, everything will be linked down below where I can. And I came across it kind of by accident. I guess because it's a much bigger gauge than I normally work at. Most of the things I make tend to be in double knitting weight yarn or in 4-ply or fingering weight yarn. Whereas this is a super bulky pattern. But I came across it and I thought, I have just the thing. Many years ago, I got a load of cones from a local business who had bought a lot of stock from Texair Yarns when Texair went out of business. And these were incredibly reduced in price. I mean, I think these cones cost me about 50p each or something. Some of them, if you bought 10, you can get them for 10p each. It was absolute knockdown price. So it was rude not to, and I still have quite a few of them in the bottom of this cupboard here. Down there are lots of cones. But I got 9 cones of this boucle yarn. This is what I've got left on one of them. Which is Texair Yarns Snazzy 45 Bluebell Loops and Gimps. Their code SY.045. Now I have tried researching this yarn in all the sort of obvious places, and I can't find any details about it. Like I say, Texair as a business went into, I don't know if it was receivership or liquidation, but that they stopped trading a few years ago, so it's not surprising that the information is not immediately available. So I've no idea what the construction is of this. I mean, obviously it's a boucle yarn, but I don't know what the fibre is. It feels quite heavy, which suggests to me there's some plant fibre in there, some cotton or perhaps a linen or something of that nature. And it doesn't feel particularly warm and cosy like a wool would. So yeah, I'm heading down the sort of plant route for what I think's in it, but I really don't know. And if anyone has got any Snazzy 45 and they know what it's made of, I'd be very interested to find out. Thank you. The pattern suggested needle size is 10mm, which I think is a US 15, and it's using a super bulky Pearl Soho yarn. I used 3 strands of this together, and I got gauge on a 7mm needle. So that's it. I think it was 14 stitches per 4 inches or something like that, and I got that using 3 strands together on a 7mm needle. So I just made the sweater from there. Modifications, probably altered the length because I normally do. I think I made it slightly longer, and also I made the armholes a little deeper. It's one of these items that's constructed from the shoulder. So you start, you work down the back, then you put the stitches on a spare thread or a spare needle, then you work down the fronts and then join for the body rather than work from the neck and split for the sleeves job. And I had a quick try on at that stage and I felt it was a little shallow. So I just added a few more rows, I think about 4 more rows, and I think it's done the trick. That feels like a sort of comfortable bit of ease around the sleeves, because obviously that means that you're picking up more when you pick up for the sleeves as well. So it's a little bit broader at the top. It's perhaps a little baggy, but it's comfortable, and that's what it's all about. So that was the only real modification that I made. If I were to make it again, I think I would do something with the neckline. It's a little bigger than I would like. I would probably just sort of make everything a little bit smaller. It's been suggested that I crochet and sort of pull it in. It doesn't feel loose, it's just the design is it's a little more open. Now, depending on the type of thing you're wearing underneath it, if I was wearing a kind of turtleneck or something, it probably would be fine. It's because I tend to wear collared shirts that it feels like it's a little bit gappy. But I'm going to live with it quite happily. So the construction is, like I say, top down, join at the underarms for the body. I've still got my stitch marker attached because this is where I was at last time I showed it to you, so I can take that off now. Yeah, so you join for the body, then work down, and then pick up for the sleeves, set in sleeves, so you work short rows until you get down to the level with the armpit, and then just work down. Fairly simple construction, clear pattern, very easy to work out what's going on, and everything is finished with an I-cord. Now, I didn't have the pattern with me when I was getting ready to do the I-cord, so I just kind of made it up a bit, and I think it's possibly curling a little more than it should because I wasn't following the instructions of how many stitches to pick up per row. But given that I don't think my row gauge matched either, that was never going to work, if you see what I mean. So yes, I made the largest size. Can't remember what that is. I'll put it on there, and I'll also put a note on of how much ease that gives me. But I'm quite happy with it. It doesn't have a button on it. It's just an edge-to-edge jacket on the original pattern. But as I'm quite round-shouldered, I like to have something joining here, otherwise things just kind of slip and fall down. So when I was doing the I-cord up this side, I just left a gap and just did a few rows of I-cord rather than attached I-cord to leave space for the button, which luckily fitted. I knew it was a big button. Again, I was slightly guessing at it, with the proviso that had it been too big for the button, because I erred on the side of large rather than small, I would have just sewn a couple of stitches to make the buttonhole loop smaller. So there are very few problems that can't be got over, it's my theory. Here are some pictures of me wearing this sweater standing up, so you can get a sense of the length of it. And I'm fairly happy with it. I think it will be quite a useful work item. It feels, I think because of the set-in sleeves, it feels sort of smart enough to wear if I'm visiting a family or something like that. So yes, so that's quite a useful thing. And it's used quite a lot of yarn because, as I said, I was using 3 strands held together. my total meterage, and there is a certain amount of sort of guesstimation in this. So all I've done is I've taken what's left, measured that and weighed it to get a sense of how much yarn I've used by also weighing the sweater, and I have used 904 grams, and I estimate this is about 2.5 meters per gram, so that comes out at 2,260 meters. But again, that's 3 strands held together, so dividing that by 3, if you were making this in a single yarn, it would be well, that divided by 3. I thought I'd written it down. I'll put that on screen as well, because I'll need to work it out again. I can't do that maths in my head, I'm afraid. And it has used up 9 of these cones. This is the most I've got left. I've got a couple of other little bits as well, and this will just go into scrap projects. It's approximately a double knitting weight, but not quite, so I will find use for that in some of the scrap projects I make. So yeah, so finished object, quite happy with it. It's all one colour. I know, that so rarely happens. I showed it on the weekly vlog and I've had people saying, who are you and what have you done with Leslie? So, but you know, sometimes it's nice to do things in all one colour. Another reason why I'm happy to do the multiple colour projects is because I'm making a large size. I usually make them for myself, and it can get a bit monotonous making all the same colour. So I'm happy to add in a bit of a contrast stripe or a little pop here and that. But with this, because it's such a large gauge, it was quite a quick knit anyway. So yes, I was happy to not get bored. That's radical, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's probably all I've got to say about this. Sorry I can't give you more information about the yarn. Like I said, I don't really know what the fibre content is, but judging by the feel of the weight and the warmth of it, I'm thinking there's some cotton in there. So that's that. This will now go in the wardrobe. I didn't block it in the traditional sense, I just pressed it. A lot of the seams were really curling, so I just pressed them a little flatter. Because given that it doesn't feel like wool, there didn't seem to be, or given that it feels like a cotton, it seemed to make more sense to just give it a little press rather than a full wet block, because that's just going to go heavy and soggy. So yes, I hope to get quite a bit of use out of this as we go into the winter. And yeah, I can take the stitch marker off now. That's exciting. Cheers. Hello lovelies. Now, one thing I forgot to say in my first clip, and apologies for the incoherence of that clip, is that if you see me wearing something hand knitted, I will put the details in the notes below as much as I can, because for example this is my crochet interpretation of the knitted boxy by Joji Locatelli. So I can't say this is the pattern, go find it here, because I made it up. And as I made it up on a published pattern, it's not something I can offer, obviously. So the yarns on this one, quite a collection. What was I saying about, you know, all the colours? So we've got stuff here from Luxury Yarns, we've got stuff here from the Knitting Goddess, and the main part of this was a Stranded Dye Works Pride set. So yeah, all sorts. I will list the details below. I have come by some more yarn, and last month we sadly lost a very valuable member of our knitting group, and I'm going to run out of battery. There I was, getting all emotional, and had to change because of the camera. I know I could edit bits like that out, but if I suddenly produced a really slick, smooth podcast, you really would be asking, who are you and what have you done with Leslie? So we're not going to do that. Back to, we lost a lovely member of our knitting group, and that was the stranded elf. Yeah, just so incredibly sad. And bless her, thinking of us all to the end, she said that she wanted her stash to be divided amongst the knitting group, which was just incredibly kind. So Jude, I know, has got some of his handspun back and that sort of thing, as his first dibs to him, absolutely. And the rest he passed to Claire, a member of our group, who put it into bundles and posted up on our Facebook group saying, you know, would you like to claim one of these bundles? And there were also some things that as soon as they saw it, they said, oh, that's got to go to that person, that's got to go to that person, because of the colour palette, knowing what people like. Some of these are, I think a lot of these are possibly stranded either seconds. Now, stranded seconds, I've bought worse quality as A1 quality than Jude will allow to go out as stranded seconds, because I know he's very particular about finishing standards and that sort of thing. So none of these look like seconds to me. Or they're sort of other bits and pieces, one of a kinds, you know, only one's got a label on. Some of them we recognise, and yeah, I'm just really touched to be offered this bag of yarn, including the bag, which is a lovely cat bag. And I'm hoping it shows up that the cat, so for example this one is all knitted fabrics. So these are different types. This one here is denim looking. Just a lovely bag, really nice and full of goodies. So I'm just going to show you them. Like I said, I don't know what any of the fibres are, they're mostly unlabelled. All but one are 4-ply or fingering weight, sorry, all but two, but I will show you them as I pull them out of the bag. So we have this lovely green. There's 100 grams of that. It's showing up slightly bluer, but it's not too far out. So it's that kind of depth of shade, but more green, less blue. It's really nice red, which is not quite as bright as it's showing. It's probably reflecting light off my sweater. So it's sort of semi-solid, really nice red. We've got 50 grams here. Now I think this is Jude's patisserie colourway. I think that's what it is. But lovely yarn. This is 100 grams of A Zooming Home for Christmas. Now, those of us who watched Jude doing the Zooming Home for Christmas colourway will know that he had real difficulties, for unknown reasons, replicating the colours. So there were some different variations of it. So I don't know which variation this is. Again, it's showing brighter. I mean, that red that you can see, as I'm looking on the camera screen, it's showing quite a bright red. It's more of a burgundy. So just tone everything down and that's the colour you're in. So we've got, now I said, you know, some people picked out some yarns saying, well, I know that's for that person. These are as bright as they look. So these were given to me, given my love of brightness and neons. So that's all very, very kind. I've got this, which again is 100 grams. I'm not sure if this is a one of a kind or if it's one of the colourways that I'm not so familiar with. But it's a lovely sort of pale green with blue, black, yellow, all sorts. This is Cascade 220. The elf made a crochet blanket. She'd made more than one. She was a very skilled crocheter, very skilled crafter. And she made a blanket that I think Jude has. made of small motifs, small squares, and this was her main colour. So this is Cascade 220, so it's a worsted weight, I think, 200 metres per 100 grams, in the colour 9076. So I'm not sure what the name of this colourway is, but you can see it's a sort of pale green, sort of mint green. Also in this palette, we have what I think is, no, I keep calling it Vintage Christmas. I'm not sure if that is the colourway, but it's certainly one of Jude's Christmas colourways, a variant thereof. And again, the red is coming up slightly brighter. It's more of a sort of dark burgundy. So just, again, tone everything down and you'll have about the right colour. And this last one is very different yarn. This is a much more rustic yarn. I've measured it on all wraps per inch and it came up as 12, which would make it a worsted weight. And lovely colours, more muted than showing on screen. There's a theme today. I think it's the glare of the weather. Yeah, and there's I think about 55 metres of that. So that would be nice as a contrast in something else. So yeah, just so kind of the elf to want to share her yarn with us in this way, so kind of Jude to arrange it, so kind of Claire to be our courier. So, you know, a quick thank you to everyone involved in that. And it's easy to make yarns precious, and there's nothing wrong with that. You know, there are some yarns that you just think, oh, I don't want to use that because you'll spend forever looking for exactly the right project. I tend not to do that, and I don't think I'll be doing that with these. I think these will be used, and used with gratitude and with love, because it's a lovely bundle of yarn to receive. See you on the next clip. Hello lovelies, how are we? I have another finished object, and not only do I have another finished object, but it was all made in the same yarn. Again, I'm sorry. Something's clearly going wrong here. It is for a child though, so maybe that's my excuse. So, this is the niece. No, this is not the niece. This is the coat that I was making for my great niece. I had hoped to have it finished mid-month so that I could give it to them, but that wasn't to be. I didn't get it finished in time, so that's okay. I'm seeing them again in December, so no problem. And this is, the pattern is the Snow Queen sweater coat by Alison Stewart Guinea. I think it's pronounced Guinea, it could be Guinea. I don't know, and if I've got it wrong, I'm sorry. It's from a book called Fairy Tale Knits, 32 Projects to Knit Happily Ever After. And it's, I think, rather cute. And I mean the pattern's cute, not necessarily my execution of it, but look. I haven't blocked this yet, so that's my next thing to do. But let me tell you about it. So you start at the bottom and make a skirt using this, I think it's called a German herringbone pattern, which is one of those patterns that looks very complicated, but is actually a 6-row repeat, and it's fairly easy to read. Once you've done a couple of repeats, you can see where you're headed and where you need to be. So that's very straightforward. You then decrease and make the bodice, which you make in one piece until you split for the sleeves, and then you do the fronts and backs separate, so all fairly as you'd expect. Sleeves, did I pick these up and knit down? Yes, I didn't sew anything, so I must have done so. Pick these up, knit down to the cuff, and then you have the frilly binds offs for the cuffs, and you pick up the pick up the button bands, pick up the neckline, work the pattern to give that frill as well, and there we are done. The original pattern is for worsted weight yarn on a 4.5mm needles. Worsted not being a standard UK yarn, I didn't have any, and I had the cones that I was very kindly given by my friend, and this is actually made of 2 yarns together. These are the cones, this is what's left. So this is actually showing the colour pretty well. I'm going to hold this close in the hope to show some of the variations in the colour. Sorry, that was a bit blurred, but hopefully you can see that it's not a solid. There are little subtle variations. Now, as I say, the gauge was initially for 4.5mm needle and worsted weight yarn. I originally thought that I would need 2 strands of this because this is a finer yarn. I thought 2 of these, 1 of these together. Tried it on a 4.5mm needle and my gauge was very loose. Went down to a 4mm, still a bit loose. Did 1 strand of each and got the right gauge. This is good. So cast it on, did all the skirt part. Then when I started on the bodice, the fabric that I was producing looked far too loose. And I measured my gauge and it was completely out because, as we know, gauge swatches lie. They're terrible porkies. So what I did is I took it down a needle size and I added a 2nd strand of this finer yarn. Now I appreciate that for most people making a pattern in this way, that's not an option. You can't then suddenly add in another ply effectively. But for me it was an option, so that's what I did. I was worried that it would make a colour change because the finer yarn is paler than the darker. But if it does, it's really not enough to make a difference. So I was happy that I was getting that denser fabric, because I was worried that a loose fabric with the weight of this skirt on the bottom of it would just drag it down and look really unpleasant. But I managed to add this extra ply, so it worked, and the colours stayed pretty much the same. So that was how I kind of made that work. And my initial gauge swatch, if you're thinking, well, that was in the herringbone pattern. No, my initial gauge swatch was in stocking stitch. So I have no idea what happened between me doing the swatch and after finishing the skirt, once I got onto the bodice, it looking so very different. But I just am quite fortunate that I was able to add this extra strand, take it down a needle size and make it work. Knitting's odd like that, isn't it? So what are these yarns? Well, I'll be perfectly frank, I have no idea. Because these are just on unlabelled cones. I suspect that this is by Bramwell and that it's a 4-ply 100% acrylic. That's my guess on this one. This one, there is a label which says Mosaic 20% mohair, 80% acrylic. And then it goes on to a lot of technical machine knitting stuff. 3 strands equals 4-ply on tension 6. Geomatics 2 strands tension 3. 1 strand each feeder, 4-colour jacquard. Christiana Wools, so I do know who makes that, I lied. So that's what this is. And it does have quite a nice soft feel. As I said, 20% mohair in with acrylic, so it's given it a nice sort of soft feel to it. But this one's pretty good as well. You know, it's not bad at all. Well, that's very damning with faint praise, wasn't it? It's not bad. So, in terms of quantities, I used 765 metres of this. Yeah, 765 metres of that. And because I was using 2 strands of this for the bodice, 980 metres of this. So it gave me a total of 1745, which does sound a lot for a child's garment, but of course you've got to halve that if you're making an estimation yourself. because I was using the 2 strands together. So that is the detail for the yarn. Modifications. Of course there are modifications, as well as, you know, changing the yarn halfway through and dropping a needle size. I made the skirt part of this slightly shorter than the original pattern. The initial design is for a sort of floor length right down to the ankle. That assumes you have no feet. An ankle length coat. And I felt for my great niece, she's quite an active little thing. She likes to run around, and I didn't want her to feel restricted or to not be able to wear this because they were worried about getting mud on it if it was that length, you know. And I felt it would be quite a warm piece if it was down to sort of calf length for her. So that was my thought process there. The cuffs, the original pattern has a frill like the collar. I did that initially and it was flaring out a lot and it felt very flappy, and we know that I don't like flappy sleeves, but also again I thought I don't want to be in a situation where my great niece is wearing this and people are worried that she's going to get the cuffs dirty and that sort of thing. I want her to play in it, I want her to use it, you know. I'd love her to be, I don't mind if she gets it covered in mud, it's washable, and the idea is that she plays and lives in it. So so I took the cuff back and I still did the picot bind off, but I didn't do the increasing for the frill, as it just seemed to create a lot of fabric that I thought would get in the way of play, whatever form that takes. The collar I did as per the pattern. I was initially thinking of not doing the frill to keep it consistent, but because it lays down it needs extra fabric, so I did that as per. The other modification I made, this pattern, the button band is just on the bodice part, and in theory you just knit, so you pick up at the side, knit across, add your buttonholes as needed, and then just cast off, and that gives you a very sort of straight edge here, which I felt looked a bit unfinished. So I tapered mine with a few short rows, just so it gave a neater, a more sort of streamlined edge and didn't look so cut off. So yeah, so those are my modifications, so nothing too drastic. You know, I didn't suddenly make it into a pair of trousers or something. Just slight modifications for the finish that I prefer, and also for the use that I hope that my great niece will get out of it. So I'm very pleased with how it's turned out. It is a pretty pattern. I saw the pattern some years ago, and for a long time had meant to make it for my other great niece, my older great niece. But in a way I'm glad I didn't, because her style, the clothes that she wears, not really this type of thing. So probably wouldn't want to wear it, whereas I'm hoping that little great niece will want to, or that she's so young that my niece, who will love this type of thing, will put her in it. So I'm hoping that she's in it, she plays in it. Like I say, I don't care if it gets covered in mud, as long as she's having fun. It can be slung in the washing machine, and I hope that it keeps her warm and cosy while she's having a great time. Cheers. Hello lovelies. Those of you who watch the vlogs will know that this month I took a bit of time off the day job and took an Introduction to Tech Editing course. This is run by Carol Ibbotson of the Cool Wool School, all will be linked below. And it was just that, an introduction to tech editing, to give you a sense of what's involved and what it's like. For those who aren't sure what I'm talking about, any more than usual, because I talk nonsense, tech editing is checking knitting and crochet patterns. So when the designer has put them together, the tech editor then checks that the measurements make sense according to the gauge, that the pattern repeat fits into the number of stitches, that the sizing is sensible, that the conversion of needle sizes is correct, those sorts of details. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to do. She also offered a course on grading, which I did, which I was very interested in, because when I have designed garments in the past for knitting magazines, I've worked to the sizes that the magazines asked for at that time, which meant I have designed a number of items that I couldn't wear, which seems a bit stupid. So I am looking to grade my own patterns, and copyrights passed back to me, so you know, I can republish them and I can grade them up so that they fit a better size range. So I did those two, and then Carol also offers a more advanced tech editing course designed to help people become professional tech editors should they so desire. And this is a fairly intensive course, runs over Zoom sessions, and there are assignments to be marked, and you know, it's quite involved and priced according to that, because you know, these things cost. And I was contemplating whether or not to sign up for it, and I was thinking, oh, is this the right time? Do I want to spend that money on this at this point? And the two people who run the course, they gave away a place on this advanced course, and I won it. So absolutely thrilled and delighted. I have started the course. I'm loving it. I mean, I'm now back at work, so time constraints are difficult, but the way that it's set up is there are live Zoom meetings, but if you're unable to attend them at the time, they're recorded and can be watched later. So there's no, you don't miss out. All right, you don't get the opportunity to ask questions in live time, but you can still see all of the conversation that went on and that sort of thing. So I'm thoroughly enjoying the course, and it's getting fairly mathematical and technical. I handed in my first assignment and really wished I hadn't. I made some absolutely stupid mistakes, which is very frustrating, because they were mistakes that I thought I'd checked myself thoroughly and hadn't. And given this is all about checking and accuracy, to have then made some fairly basic errors is embarrassing, frankly. So I was rather embarrassed with myself and beating myself up quite a lot. But I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying just to get on with the next part and learn from where I could have found, where even my self-checking could have gone a little bit further. Though, you know, trying to learn from what's gone on. So I'm a week, this is, as I'm recording this bit, today is the last day of the first week. And thoroughly enjoying it, blowing my mind a little bit. I used to do a lot of analytical and statistical work, not at a particularly high level, but it was very numbers heavy. And since I've been conducting funerals, tend not to be so involved in numbers, apart from, you know, running my own books, which is fairly straightforward. So that's all a revisit. But an enjoyable one. I am really enjoying the course. I just am very cross with myself for dropping clangers that were daft in my first assignment. But we learn and we progress, hopefully. Apart from that, it's getting to be a bit Christmas chaos behind me. That's why I'm not sitting in my normal chair, because I've got boxes of Christmas stuff and projects on the go and that sort of thing. All the projects will be in next month's podcast as I finish them, because they're all works in progress at the moment, including this one, which is a little hat for my great niece, which will have ears on it, because that's what my niece would like for her. So that's fine, that we can do. yeah, so sort of plodding away with just a couple of Christmassy bits, and I'll show you those next month. So we're heading towards December. I will be doing Vlogmas, and despite all requests to the contrary, I will be singing. So apologies. I will completely understand if you don't want to watch. I've written some of the songs already. We're not all there yet, but normally it's an ongoing process. So that will happen. I will probably try and put the video up at the same time that I put this one up and the weekly vlog, which is 5 o'clock UK time. I don't know whether I might be kind of a day behind. So on the 1st, I'll do everything up to the 1st. On the 2nd, it'll be everything I've done on the 1st, and so forth. We'll see how it goes. It really depends what other commitments I have on my time. And if I get days when I don't post because that's just not possible, then that's just not possible, and you'll get a slightly longer one the next time. So I don't sort of try and overcommit when it comes to Vlogmas, but I do enjoy doing it, and they will be there if you'd like to see them. A few things lined up, so hopefully there will be some interesting things to show you. But I completely understand, particularly if a lot of your regular podcasters that you watch are doing Vlogmas, it becomes a lot. So I won't be at all offended if people say I just can't. That I completely understand. As it's December, I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I will be doing the December make-along. This will be on Ravelry, so email me if you're unable to use Ravelry. And the idea is just to spend a little bit of crafting time every day and put a post on Ravelry to say what you've been up to, you know, work the next colour in my advent, did another 3 rounds of the crochet project I'm making, you know, whatever it is you're doing, put it in there, and there'll be a draw in January to pull a winner, and there'll be a prize. So the year-long, not quite, the 3/4 of a year-long make-along, the clearly not quite enough yarn make-along, that I will also keep open until the end of December, and I will draw that in January, so you'll have up to the 31st to put your entries in. Items don't have to be finished. 3/4 finished is kind of what we were looking for, so hopefully that is doable for all of you. And again, it's lovely to see the comments in there and the encouragement of each other, and people asking questions about patterns and yarns and ideas and that sort of thing. So it's great to see that happening, and there will be a draw for a pattern prize for people who have comments without photos. So if you are commenting but not adding a lot of pictures, you're still in with a chance of a prize. I think that's it for the make-alongs and the Vlogmas. Because of the calendar, New Year's Eve, the 31st, is a Saturday. I will probably put the December podcast up between Christmas and New Year. It will be sometime in that week. So it will be up by that Saturday, or possibly on that Saturday, but it won't be up the weekend before, because I will be busy, and I suspect a lot of you will be as well. So I think that's it for this month. I have things to make, homework to do, Christmas to get ready for. Because I had a couple of weeks off, I got a bit ahead of the game, which is a nice feeling, but never quite as ahead of the game as one would wish. So hey ho, it's all good fun, and I hope that whatever you're doing, whatever you celebrate, if you celebrate in December or if you don't, I hope that you're having fun. I hope that you're able to be with the people that you want to see, and that you have time for the crafting that you enjoy and that brings you peace and calm and creativity and all those good things. So thanks again, everyone. Take care. See you next month. Cheers. Bye-bye.